We are going to Phillips Island, and we're with our team.
Penguins. No, he's not wearing shorts.
Right, so I'll be the last one. And our guide is, good morning.
G'day matey, I'm John, how are you doing?
Yeah! So, I'm stoked. When you meet everybody. Where's Grace?
Where's Grace?
I want to take a solo chair.
Hello.
Okay. So did you know this is $5? $5. Yeah. We are with, hello. So this is the what tunnel?
The Burnley Tunnel.
The Burnley Tunnel, and we are underwater, it seems. Yeah.
We have a lovely Yarra River that we go over, which before white man turned up a couple of hundred years ago was drinking water.
Oh, so this is below the Yarra River.
Yeah.
Right. Is it a long ways away?
Sorry?
It is fairly long. I can't remember how many kilometres it is, but when you're coming back, it's not as long. So this is the, I suppose, the way out, and it carries a lot of traffic on a daily basis. Especially in peak hour, you can probably be sitting in the Burnley Tunnel doing about 30-40 kilometres an hour. There was an incident where a truck caught on fire. In here, was it 7? Yeah. So the connection between the city and the east, everyone was having to go around the long way. So that chopped up all of our normal streets as well. So it's completely blocked off.
So I heard Mario told us that he got caught of like speeding like 5 over like 40. It was enforced in the city. Is that normal? Have you been caught like doing that?
I've been booked for doing 73 kilometres in a 70 zone. So
That's
when
3
I said,
over.
no, your radar's out, they said, no, you were speeding.
Did you get off it?
No.
I'm contesting on the 20th of June, 69 in a 60. So I'll see how I go in Caulfield. Because I was coming,
69 in a, yeah, I was
cameras
coming
at the
down.
bottom of the hill.
Yeah, I was coming downhill as well, out of back into Melbourne from Ballarat. So
I'm not sure how long the tunnel is, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, it's probably 2 kilometres long, yeah. Probably.
there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're exiting. I started filming like
It's
maybe
not
2.
free to use this way either. It's toll ways all the way through.
So I'm gonna adjust the brightness. This might be too bright for you.
How's
So
that
every time
happy?
you go into one of these,
We had to do 60
you
and
can't
80
get
because of
charged
that.
money. Yeah. So that little bip, see the mirror on the windscreen? It's got that little tag up the top. Yeah, that's our E-tags. So we have to make sure, yeah, like exactly the same. So we have to make sure that there's money on there. But it warns you when you go under, if it's low on money, it'll go beep beep. If it's really low, it goes beep beep beep. And if it's really goes beep 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 beep. I know mine regularly goes.
They knew how much land was in Europe, and they decided there must be something south. Well, you must go south. Okay, so reluctantly, the first fleet did come down south. When they arrived at Stingray Bay, they were very, very hungry, and the Aboriginals actually did help them out with food. Okay, so and the British claimed Australia, but the Dutch were here first of all in Western Australia. Okay, but the Dutch were not an exploration fleet. There was a spice company trading the Dutch, and they arrived near Karratha, where all the iron ore is, and I've actually just come back from there 12 months ago working in the mines, and I completely understand why they did not claim Australia. over there. There's lots of rocks and iron ore and little vegetation in that particular area where they arrived. But however, the Dutch did turn up several times there, and they used it as a resting place. Now, if the British didn't turn up in 1788, we had the French around about in 1802 arrive at Phillip Island and Kangaroo Island. And even though the British and the French were at war, between 6 times they were at war between 1788 and 1888, the French and British explorers weren't at war, so they actually traded notes and gave each other advice. So Kangaroo Island, if anyone goes to Kangaroo Island off South Australia, we've let the French name some places like Vivon Bay and Cape de Kudik. But 12 months later, the Americans arrived on Kangaroo Island off South Australia as well, and there's a place called American River there, named after the Americans. So yeah, so if we were just whether we're lucky or unlucky, but as I said, the British did claim Australia. Now, a very important part of our history is that the French and British were at war for that 100-year period. So Captain Cook came to Australia, found wonderful opportunities, all these different animals, and Captain Cook sent diagrams of the kangaroo in Australia, and he said it had a face like a deer, was more like the size of a deer, but hopped like a rabbit. They also found a platypus, and when he drew a diagram of that, the British didn't believe such animals could exist. But a big part of why the British did stay and colonise Australia, of course, was all about more land, and claiming land was about power as well, but it was our unique wildlife. So today, some of you, a lot of our international guests do come to Australia because of our unique wildlife. All right, but with the infrastructure and getting Australia going, so to speak, it took quite a while. And one of the reasons was, as I said, France. It didn't matter who the President or Prime Minister of France was, they kept announcing war on Britain 6 times during that 100-year period. So France would attack the British, they'd lose the war, and they go, no, we're not having any war, and just quietly they would be getting their men ready for war again. Yet here they are, Australia, new, fantastic place, great opportunity. So the British were like, oh, we haven't got spare men. All our men are used fighting the French. But they did have overcrowding in the jails, and they had convicts and criminals. So they decided to send them out to Australia. Initially, the poor old convicts or criminals had to stay in ships called hulks, Hulks, very cramped, terrible conditions, and they were put to hard labour in Sydney. And so the convicts helped establish or build Melbourne, Sydney and Tasmania. Okay, in Tasmania, the poor old convicts, they built their own jail, believe it or not. So yeah, so Adelaide's a free state, so the convicts or criminals weren't put to hard labour. So a reward for the convicts is that the harder they worked, their sentencing would be reduced, and they would become a free citizen and be given a ticket of leave. Yeah, so my great-grandparents, they were convicts or criminals. I like to practice their art form today, so if you can leave your valuables in the top of your bags today on the bus, save you rummaging all the way through to the bottom, that would be helpful. Yeah, so 1788. Now, Melbourne didn't get going till around about the 1830s. All right, 50 or 60 years later, and you ask why? Well, basically the British were going straight to what you call Botany Bay, and they tried to explore and come down south. Hamilton, Hume and Hovell were 3 explorers, and they kept coming across our big river called the Yarra River and had trouble getting across there. But I'm not sure whether many people have travelled down from Sydney, but there's wonderful pasture lands as well. So every time they kept coming down, they said this was great, because Australia economy was the wool industry, and we rode off the sheep's back, as they say. So sheep are not native to Australia, everyone. The British brought them here, and we had great pasture lands. But nevertheless, in the 1830s, Melbourne did get going and became initially where that Yarra River is, where the Crown Casino is, that was actually drinking water through there. So, but where the casino was and all in Port Melbourne and South Bank there, they were actually abattoirs for cattle and sheep and there. So unfortunately all the waste products of the cattle and sheep 150, 200 years ago all went in that Yarra River. So within 10 years in Whiteman you couldn't drink that water, but if you go probably 15 kilometres north of the Yarra River, it is drinking water up there, and you've got cod and fish and trout and all those type of fish. Now Melbourne, and I think Kathy probably may want to know why our layout of Melbourne, whether it's good, bad, such narrow streets. But what happened, everyone, was that the government was in Sydney, so the capital of Australia was Sydney. All right, but a little bit later on, Melbourne became the place to be. Does anyone know why? Gold. Gold, very good. What's the chemistry symbol for gold? Does anyone know?
AU.
Very good. Geez, this is smart. We're right on it here. So what happened? We found gold. So our sheep farmers, basically, the drovers would drive the sheep out on horseback to find new pasture lands, and out in around Ballarat and Bendigo they found gold nuggets the size of potatoes.
Wow.
So initially the government bought the gold back and wanted the farmers to be quiet about it. But of course that never happens, everyone talks. So the population in 1851 in Melbourne was 23,000, and it went to 3,000. 20,000 people left their jobs. So whether you're a school teacher, policeman, whatever, they all just left their jobs and they went to the gold fields looking for gold. There was a gold rush. And people from New South Wales came down as well. So guess what happened? The government had a problem. All these people around in Melbourne, so Melbourne did become the capital of Australia for a short time.
Oh.
But there was an argument between, so Melbourne did become the capital, but just going back to who drew up the plans for our city of Melbourne, it was Sydney. So the government in Sydney did draw the plans up, and there was a jealousy between Melbourne and Sydney, and I'm not sure whether the people in Sydney really cared that much about Melbourne. So that could have been a reason that they got these narrow streets and it's very hard to manoeuvre around. But anyway, so that's the story. A quick story of Melbourne and Sydney. There was a big jealousy, a big rivalry. We have our Parliament House at the end of Collins Street, and but of course our Parliament House is now in Canberra. And the reason it's in Canberra, everyone, is that Melbourne and Sydney governments could not agree who would be the capital of Australia because of the jealousy and the fact that the arguments it should be Sydney, that's where they first arrived, but Melbourne's got all the gold and wealth, and so they couldn't agree, so they put it in Canberra, everyone. All right. Yeah, so that's a quick little run through on Melbourne, Australia. And in 1853, there was 40% of the world's gold came from Melbourne, and news spread around the world about the gold, and we had people from America, Canada, China, England, Ireland, Scotland, and of course some Europeans coming to Australia for gold. At one stage we were getting 100 ships minimum a month arriving in the port of Melbourne. So our government decided to charge a £10 fee, tax levy. The British, we love taxes and fees here in Australia, and just for arriving here. So our Chinese £10 was a lot of money, and our Chinese didn't want to pay that, so we had nearly 20,000 Chinese arrive at a place called Robe, R-O-B-E, on the border of South Australia and Victoria, so they didn't have to pay their £10. And they were quite happy to walk the 400 miles to the goldfields rather than arrive in Melbourne and walk 100 miles. But some very lucky Chinese near the Grampian Mountains. They went to fill their billies or buckets up with water, and they came back and filled them up with gold. History tells us it's Australia's largest alluvial gold find, perhaps the biggest alluvial gold find in the whole world. So yeah, so we had 20,000 Chinese, as I say, walk to the gold fields. So when I started guiding 16 years ago, people say, well, what is an Australian? Well, we're 16 years ago we had more different nationalities living in Australia than any other country. Okay, and that was due to the gold rush and people coming to Australia for their newfound gold.
We've arrived, and this is this the?
Are you videotaping?
Yeah, I've been ever
Oh,
since.
no wonder you've been talking to yourself.
You must be thinking of something else.
Yelling all morning until he went to sleep.
So, is this a kangaroo? No.
Yeah.
This is the kangaroo.
Moonlit Sanctuary.
This is Moonlit Sanctuary, where you have
Koalas and
koalas and kangaroos. And they have cha-cha. They have chas. They have almas. So everybody's here. We're gonna have lunch at 12:15, and we'll be departing at 12:40. So pretty good time to have some pictures with the koalas and kangaroos, the emus, the wallabies, Tasmanian devils, and what else?